who will go through the same manoeuvres. This bee will be followed by another and another, till a large wall of wax has been built, hanging from the bar of the hive as in figure 55, only that it will not yet have cells fashioned in it. Meanwhile the bees which have been gathering honey out of doors begin to come back laden, but they cannot store their honey, for there are no cells made yet to put it in. Neither can they build combs with the rest, for they have no wax in their wax pockets. So they just go and hang quietly on to the other bees, and there they remain for 24 hours, during which time they digest the honey they have gathered, and part of it forms wax and oozes out from the scales under their body. Then they are prepared to join the others at work and plaster wax onto the hive. And now, as soon as a rough lump of wax is ready, another set of bees come to do their work. These are called the nursing bees, because they prepare the cells and feed the young ones. One of these bees, standing on the roof of the hive, begins to force her head into the wax, biting with her jaws and moving her head to and fro. Soon she has made the beginning of a round hollow, and then she passes on to make another, while a second bee takes her place and enlarges the first one. As many as 20 bees will be employed in this way, one after another, upon each hole, before it is large enough for the base of a cell. Meanwhile, another set of nursing bees have been working just in the same way on the other side of the wax, and so a series of hollows are made back to back all over the comb. Then the bees form the walls of the cells, and soon a number of 6-sided tubes, about half an inch deep, stand all along each side of the comb, ready to receive honey or bee eggs. You can see the shape of these cells in CD figure 56, and notice how closely they fit into each other. Even the ends are so shaped that as they lie back to back, the bottom of one cell, B figure 56, fits into the space between the ends of 3 cells meeting it from the opposite side, A figure 56, while they fit into the spaces around it. Upon this plan, the clever little bees fill every atom of space, use the least possible quantity of wax, and make the cells lie so closely together that the whole comb is kept warm when the young bees are in it. There are some kinds of bees who do not live in hives, but each one builds a home of its own. These bees, such as the upholsterer bee, which digs a hole in the earth and lines it with flowers and leaves, and the mason bee, which builds in walls, do not make 6-sided cells, but round ones, for room is no object to them. But nature has gradually taught the little hive bee to build its cells more and more closely, till they fit perfectly within each other. If you make a number of round holes close together in a soft substance, and then squeeze the substance evenly from all sides, the rounds will gradually take a 6-sided form, showing that this is the closest shape into which they can be compressed. Although the bee does not know this, yet, as she gnaws away every bit of wax that can be spared, she brings the holes into this shape. As soon as one comb is finished, the bees begin another by the side of it, leaving a narrow lane between, just broad enough for 2 bees to pass back to back as they crawl along, and so the work goes on till the hive is full of combs. As soon, however, as a length of about 5 or 6 inches of the first comb has been made into cells, the bees which are bringing home honey no longer hang to make it into wax, but begin to store it in the cells. We all know where the bees go to fetch their honey, and how, when a bee settles on a flower, she thrusts into it her small tongue-like proboscis, which is really a lengthened underlip, and sucks out the drop of honey. This she swallows, passing it down her throat into a honey bag or first stomach, which lies between her throat and her real stomach. And when she gets back to the hive, she can empty this bag and pass honey back through her mouth again into the honey cells. But if you watch bees carefully, especially in the springtime, you will find that they carry off something else besides honey. Early in the morning, when the dew is on the ground, or later in the day in moist shady places, you may see a bee rubbing itself against a flower, or biting those bags of yellow dust or pollen which we mentioned in Lecture 7. When she has covered herself with pollen, she will brush it off with her feet, and bringing it to her mouth, she will moisten and roll it into a little ball, and then pass it back from the first pair of legs to the second, and so to the third or hinder pair. Here she will pack it into a little hairy groove called a basket in the joint of one of the hind legs, where you may see it looking like a swelled joint as she hovers among the flowers. She often fills both hind legs in this way, and when she arrives back at the hive, the nursing bees take the lumps from her and eat it themselves, or mix it with honey to feed the young bees, or when they have any to spare, store it away in old honey cells to be used by and by. This is the dark bitter stuff called bee bread, which you often find in a honeycomb, especially in a comb which has been filled late in the summer. When the bee has been relieved of the bee bread, she goes off to one of the clean cells in the new comb, and standing on the edge throws up the honey from the honey bag into the cell. One cell will hold the contents of many honey bags, and so the busy little workers have to work all day filling cell after cell, in which the honey lies uncovered, being too thick and sticky to flow out, and is used for daily food, unless there is any to spare, and then they close up the cells with wax to keep for the winter. Meanwhile, a day or two after the bees have settled in the hive, the queen bee begins to get very restless. She goes outside the hive and hovers about a little while, and then comes in again. And though generally the bees all look very closely after her to keep her indoors, yet now they let her do as she likes. Again she goes out, and again back, and then at last she soars up into the air and flies away. But she is not allowed to go alone. All the drones of the hive rise up after her, forming a guard of honour to follow her wherever she goes. In about half an hour she comes back again, and then the working bees all gather round her, knowing that now she will remain quietly in the hive and spend all her time in laying eggs. For it is the queen bee who lays all the eggs in the hive. This she begins to do about 2 days after her flight. There are now many cells ready, besides those filled with honey, and, escorted by several bees, the queen bee goes to one of these, and putting her head into it, remains there a second, as if she were examining whether it would make a good home for the young bee. Then coming out, she turns round and lays a small oval bluish-white egg in the cell. After this she takes no more notice of it, but goes on to the next cell and to the next, doing the same thing, and laying eggs in all the empty cells equally on both sides of the comb. She goes on so quickly that she sometimes lays as many as 200 eggs in one day. Then the work of the nursing bees begins. In 2 or 3 days each egg has become a tiny maggot or larva, and the nursing bees put into its cell a mixture of pollen and honey which they have prepared